Hello and welcome, my friend, to the Phillip Mason Show, where acquiring wisdom is king, learning is home-centered and lifelong, resulting in great decisions in our education, career, and entrepreneurial path. I'm your host, Phillip Mason, and I am delighted to have this time with you today in episode number 15. So today we're going to talk in detail about step number 5 in our 5th step to wisdom, our overall 10 steps to wisdom. And we're going to go in detail on why it's so important for us to deny ourselves, what that means, what we're talking about when we deny ourselves, and be able to go into depth on that. So I want to go through the first 10 steps for acquiring wisdom, just to review those for your benefit here. So I'm going to go through them rapid fire, so just listen carefully here. So number 1 is humble yourself. Number 2 is willingness to learn. Number 3 is be believing. Number 4 is pivot in faith. Number 5 is deny yourself. Number 6 is serve to lift others. And number 7 is live by virtue and truth. Number 8 is be inquisitive. And number 9 is develop your talents. And number 10 is build a happy family. So those are the 10 foundational truths and steps to developing wisdom in your life so you can reach your full potential as a person and be able to make great decisions every time. So I want you to just kind of think about this with me for a moment. What are some of the other names that we could have for deny yourself? What does that mean to deny yourself? We could potentially use here in place of deny yourself would be temperance. Right? So many classical writers and thinkers, many modern self-help gurus have talked about the importance of temperance. Sometimes they call it self-restraint. Sometimes they call it self-control. Sometimes they call it being disciplined. Be disciplined. So there's 4 different names there just right off the bat that we could use in place of denying yourself. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of shape and context to what I'm talking about. So it's interesting, Jesus Christ, in the New Testament, he very specifically gave some commands to his disciples. And what are disciples? Well, they're disciplined followers of Christ. And that really can go for any area of study or any person or study that you go after. When you're disciplined in it, you're very focused in doing the right thing. And you're denying yourself of other opportunities to use your efforts or your energies in other ways. And so you're becoming very disciplined in that. So this is actually what Christ said. I'm not going to read this here. This is from Luke 9:23, and it's actually in a couple different places, but we're going to read it here from Luke chapter 9, verses 23. And this is what Christ says. He says, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." So he's saying, if you're going to come after me, if you're going to follow my path, you have to deny yourself. And taking up your cross is kind of a way of saying, being able to put off what your own desires are, what your own passions are, be able to put those to the side and be disciplined in following the commandments of Christ. So this really applies to anything in life, my friend. And so, I know with your faith in Christ, I know that this is something that'll be a blessing and benefit to you to hear this. But really, if for others out there that you may interact with, it really doesn't matter if they believe in the Old Testament or New Testament, or if they're a believer in Christ or not. There's a tremendous truth here, and there's natural laws that we're all governed by. And those natural laws require us as a human being for us to be disciplined, for us to exercise self-restraint, for us to be temperate individuals, and to deny ourselves of certain things that would actually hurt us or corrupt us and keep us from being our best selves, from being godly, from being Christ-like. So let's think about this also from the moment of what's the fruit or what's the results of denying ourselves so that we can learn wisdom. So let's go through this. I just have a list here. So the first one, let's talk about increased freedom. That's one of the outcomes or results of denying yourself, is you have more freedom, which this is kind of an interesting one because a lot of times people think that when they don't get to do what they want to do, they feel like it's hampering their freedom or restricting their freedom. When the reality is, if you're doing something that's not good for yourself, you're actually restricting your freedom. Now, if you're withholding something that's good from yourself, something, for example, like eating vegetables or complimenting someone who has done a good job in their work, those can all be very virtuous things. We shouldn't hold back from those things, right? But when something could be harmful to who we are as a person, it could be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. When we hold back on those things, we actually develop a discipline and a strength and a power in our lives because we do that. And that increases our freedom. It gives us more options for the future. And as we go further along here, I'll kind of explain what I mean by that in more detail. Also, you just avoid negative consequences in life. When you do what's best for yourself and you deny yourself of things that aren't good for yourself, you in denying yourself, you actually eliminate the threat of having negative consequences in your life. So, for example, if you live in your marriage in such a way that you always respect that marriage covenant or that marriage promise that you've made with your spouse, then you don't have to worry about the negative consequences of divorce. You don't have to worry about the negative consequences of having um, a child out of a wedlock, or you don't have to worry about the negative consequences of having a spouse who's not happy with the marriage arrangement. You just avoid all that stuff altogether, and it's awesome. It's great. It's the best way to live. And the next thing on here that I've been thinking about is when we deny ourselves, we're actually creating this very solid integrity within our character. So our character, who we are, just has this very strong, it's just very well composed character that allows us to continually make better and better decisions as we go through life. And it becomes easier and easier for us to make good choices because we have that integrity in our character, because we've made good choices in the past. It just keeps astronomically going up, exponentially increasing our character and our likelihood of making wise choices in the future. Now, it's kind of interesting. When we go back to Luke chapter 9, verse 25, Christ actually says another thing in relation to this. He says, so this is verse 25 of chapter 9. It says, "For what a man is advantaged if he gain the whole world and lose himself or be cast away." So Christ is basically, he's saying, you can pursue the things of the world. You can pursue all the vice and all the lusts and all the passions of the flesh. And you can acquire great wealth, great fame, great power, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that people lust after, you can have all of those things. But if you haven't learned how to manage yourself, if you haven't learned how to control yourself, then what are you worth? Are you worth anything? Not really. That self-control is everything. That self-mastery is everything. If to be able to be in control, to make the right decision every time is so critical. And honestly, that's one of the major flaws of we look through leaders throughout the history of the world, is that because they are leaders, they're in a position to amass all of this stuff and in their lives, whatever it is that they desire. It could be material possessions like buildings, or it could be armies, or it could be wives. Maybe they want to have a lot of wives or concubines, or maybe they want to have a lot of fame, and they have a lot of books written about them. The list goes on and on. Different leaders, different times have wanted all sorts of different things, and they they exercise what we call unrighteous dominion to get those things into their lives. And even for good leaders who do the right things, they're oftentimes in a position where they do amass a lot of things, a lot of wealth, even if it's justly obtained. And they still have to learn to manage themselves well and be disciplined with what they've been given and exercise self-restraint so it doesn't corrupt them. One of the, I'll throw this in here. One of the saddest stories in the Bible is that of Solomon. So Solomon had everything, and he was extremely wise, one of the wisest men on the planet. But his wisdom turned to foolishness when he stopped following the commandments of God, and he indulged in the flesh, in the lust of the flesh. And so his wisdom turned to foolishness, and God stopped blessing him towards the end of his life. So he started off just a really amazing life, really amazing person, really amazing leader. People came from all over to hear his wisdom, and then all that fame and that glory, and he just started doing things his own way instead of doing it the way God wanted him to do it, and it led to his downfall. He stopped he stopped denying himself of these privileges, and it corrupted him over time. Specifically, his wives. He brought in wives from different nations whom he was hoping to form alliances with, and his wives, they came from all different backgrounds, and they really split his ability to make good choices and to deny himself. So if we think about this, what if we think about this in more of a modern context now, we've given some examples from the Old and New Testament. What are some examples in our lives, in your life specifically, where we might need to deny ourselves? So I think a big one here, especially in America, is food. Like food, we overindulge in food all the time as Americans. In fact, if you go drive through any downtown area in the United States, you'll see plenty of restaurants. And these restaurants are all designed to indulge people in food. And overeating or eating the wrong types of foods is very common in America. Obesity and being overweight in America is a very common issue. And that's something where we would benefit from delayed gratification, right? If we say, I'm not going to eat that extra dessert, or I'm not going to eat that fast food, or I'm only going to eat what my body needs, or I'm going to eat the right kind of food, and I'm going to not eat these other foods. I'm going to deny myself of these other foods so that I can be healthy, I can be vibrant, I can sleep well at night, so I can exercise with strength, and I can stay awake at work and perform well my responsibilities at work. And that's giving you freedom when you deny yourself of those food pleasures that you might otherwise indulge in. This can be for drink too. A lot of people indulge in different drinks that really aren't really good and healthy for the body. Alcohol being one of the big ones, coffee, energy drinks. There's a lot of different things that people put in their bodies that actually hurt the body and actually prevent the body from functioning at its best, and actually are actually altering the way your brain is working and the way your nervous system works, and other functions of your body. And that's really not good because you're losing control. Another one that I think is huge, my friend, is sexual appetites, like not having control over those sexual desires. That's a huge one here in America. Sometimes it can be gift giving. Sometimes we're too excessive in our gift giving. Sometimes it may be travel. We might be out traveling when we should be at home doing work with our families, or when we should be saving money for our emergency fund or something like that. Or maybe it's vacationing. Maybe it's taking really lavish vacations when really we're not in a position financially to do so. It may be just neglecting responsibilities at home when you're out on vacation. It could be that too. There could be a lot of different scenarios here. Material possessions are a big one. We live in a time in the history of the world where materialism has become its own religion, and people worship the material things that they have, and they use it to substitute for human relationships even, or anything that's meaningful or brings real fulfillment to them. And so, maybe it's denying yourself that new car or that new boat or that new house, whatever it is, right? That's holding you back. Maybe you spend a lot of money on sporting goods, and really you should probably spend more time with your children, or spending money on your children and helping them with their education, whatever it is. There could be 100 different scenarios. But for you specifically, I want you to think about like how this might apply for you. Like, what is it specifically in your life that's holding you back? It's, some people love mountain biking. So sometimes it's coveting the latest mountain bike that came out. Are you going to drop $5,000 on that bike when, you have medical bills that are coming up for a family member, and you really should help with those? Whatever it is, denying yourself to be able to serve and lift others. Maybe you're a business owner, you're starting your new business, and there's a piece of equipment that you want for your business, and you don't have the funds for it fully. And instead of getting a lesser grade of equipment and just starting your business with that, you take out a loan to get the nicer equipment. And all of a sudden you've created this burden of extra payments, and you don't have the freedom of being able to save money that you otherwise are giving away to a bank. And it's crimping your ability to grow the business and expand it because of that heavy burden that extra equipment has placed on your business. So another way to think about this would be, if in your situation where you have children, think, what is it that you'd want to teach your children? And really, as a parent, you see the wisdom you know what, you love your child or your children, and you want them to deny themselves because you know that it'll help them to accomplish great things, and help them be successful. So here's just a few thoughts on what you could do to teach your children that would help them and bless their lives. And the one thing I will preface this with, some of the things that I'm listing here, they're going to seem like things that aren't important. And I know this might be difficult for you because sometimes you've been taught different things about this by the world and by those around you and even in your own family. But these things are very fundamental and very important to people's success. When they deny themselves of these things, it leads to other successes in other parts of their lives. So just kind of keep that in mind as I go through these. So the first thing, if you were to teach your children, would be to teach them to guard their chastity or to live a chaste life. And what does that mean? Well, that means to keep yourself sexually pure and clean and to not engage in any sexual sin. Now, this is a difficult one for people living in America because that's one of those areas where we've quoted from the Old Testament, or we've talked about Solomon in the Old Testament. And one of the commandments in the Old Testament is to not commit fornication or adultery. But that's something that's very common in America today. And it actually holds a lot of people back from developing true wisdom, is by engaging in that type of lifestyle. Now, there's an interesting story told by Stephen R. Covey that's, I think, is just very profound. And I'm just going to relate that here real briefly. So Stephen R. Covey he was a consultant, business consultant it was actually a financial institution, a bank. And this CEO had a lot of success in his bank and had grown it, but things were starting to falter and the business wasn't doing well. And he couldn't quite pinpoint what was happening. Why was the bank not being successful? And so he had Stephen R. Covey come in and check things out. So Stephen R. Covey actually went around and he started interviewing different people. And of course, he started with the CEO, but he started interviewing different people in the organization. He had free reign to go through the company and talk with people. And he said it was kind of interesting that when he talked with people, he said after a while, he noticed a lot of people were hesitant about sharing things with him. And he could tell they all wanted to tell him something, but then they would never tell him what it was. So he was like, something's going on here. There's definitely something on here, but we've got to drill down deeper to find out what it is. And he says people just kept giving him these superficial answers. And he knew those weren't the correct answers based on what he had known about the company and its progress and success in the past. And so finally, he just started asking people, like, you're not telling me something, like, what's going on? Like, what's really bothering you here about this situation at the bank? And then he finally said, one person spoke up and said, well, everybody knows. And he says, well, what? What is it that everybody knows? He says, well, the CEO's having a sexual relationship or having an affair with another employee in our office. And after Stephen R. Covey went around and he kind of talked with everyone again, they all agreed that this was a problem that was very concerning to them. And why was it a problem? Well, there's actually a number of reasons why. But one of the key ones is that these employees, they had trusted their CEO and their leader, and he was teaching them and telling them to be disciplined about how they went about their lives. And yet the CEO was demonstrating by having an affair with someone else in the office that he wasn't being disciplined in his own life and with his own integrity, and he wasn't upholding the standard. And so that was hurting everyone else's trust in the CEO, and where the CEO wasn't willing to deny himself of this pleasure. And everyone in the office knew that this CEO was married, and so he was not only not showing discipline in the office, but he was also being unfaithful to his wife and not untrue to the covenant or the promise that he'd made with his wife. And so Stephen R. Covey, once this came out, he knew exactly what he had to do. So he actually went and met with the CEO and said, hey, I know what's wrong now with your organization. And the CEO was like, okay, great. This will be fantastic. And he says, you are having a sexual relationship with someone else in the office, and everybody else in the office knows that, and they don't trust you now because of that. And the CEO was totally taken back by this, and he was totally surprised. And why would he be surprised? Well, a lot of times we think we can do things without people knowing about it. And also, this isn't something that's related to business function, right? So this he thought this was a personal issue, but really this was a trust and integrity issue because he wasn't denying himself. And so everyone was picking up on that, and it was just absolutely causing morale in the organization to crumble. And so at first, the CEO was kind of denying this was being a problem. And Stephen pressed him. He says, "No, this is something you need to change. You're not holding yourself up with integrity, and you're not holding yourself up with integrity in your marriage relationship. You're not holding yourself up as the leader of this company because of this false relationship that you have. And so you have to change this. The right thing to do would be to apologize to your employees and end this relationship with this other employee, and then to go to your wife and tell her what you've been doing and apologize to her. And that's when you'll get your integrity back. And that's when, as you deny yourself, you'll start regaining control of your business again." So super, super important lesson here for that CEO, from Stephen R. Covey. And I just think that's so profound, that our personal integrity affects everything else that we do. Our personal willingness to exercise self restraint and to deny ourselves impacts everything else around us. And it's fundamental to our wisdom. No, and of course, in this situation with the CEO, no one wants to be a hypocrite, right? But that's what he was. He was being a hypocrite. And everyone was picking up on the fact that he was hypocritical. And so it's hard to be a wise person when you're being a hypocrite, right? They're not compatible. You can't put them together. They're opposites. So really, this is something that America needs to work on. And really, it's something everyone in the world needs to work on. But saving your virtue for your marriage and exercising self-restraint in sexual matters is very important in our society. And it's something that we just don't do. And it's one of those things that really keeps us from being successful as a nation. And individually, it will certainly keep us from being successful. The other things that I would teach your children is to just take responsibility for themselves. And they can do that by learning to work for and provide for their wants and also for their needs, right? So as they do that, they learn to take care of themselves and they learn to take care of others. So if they're going out working in a business, they have to learn to take care of others in order to take care of themselves. When your child, or when you go out to earn a living and take care of your needs, what you're actually doing is taking on what we call a stewardship. So a stewardship is where you have responsibility over certain aspects of a business, and you're expected to make sure that those get fulfilled every time, every day. And you're actually delaying gratification when you go to work and you provide for yourself, because you're saying, I could be spending time doing all these other things or engaging in these other pleasures, but I'm going to go to work and I'm going to earn money or income to be able to provide for myself and provide for other people or provide for my child. And that just does something wonderful to our character and to our souls. It just lifts us and inspires us, and it gives us confidence and courage when we deny ourselves in that way. So those are some of the things that I would teach my child, and things that you could teach your child that I think would be really helpful. I think thinking about it and framing it up in that way helps us to understand why it's important. That's why I do it that way. Now, really, the whole message here is for you to be in control of your thoughts, your words, and your actions. And of course, I include myself in that, right? So I want to be in control of my thoughts, my words, and my actions. There's nothing that's more important. Once you start losing control of that, for one thing, it's scary. For another thing, it's hard to be self-confident. It's hard to feel good about yourself when you're in that situation. And then oftentimes you have consequences to deal with that impacted other people, especially when you weren't in your right senses. And that can just be a domino effect that can go through your whole life and cause a whole bunch of unintended consequences. So denying yourself is really important that way. So don't ever let your lusts, your passions, your vanity take over and control your decision-making ability. So really, you're the one that should be the master. You're the one that should be in control. And that's why I use the example of Jesus Christ, because he was always perfectly in control all the time. Like if you read through the New Testament, you can see that he is in control in every situation. Even when he's being crucified by the Romans, he's the one that's still in charge. He's the one that's in control. Like he had perfect self-mastery, he had perfect self-control, perfect temperance, perfect self-restraint. And he's a perfect example in that. And because of that, he has all wisdom. So really, my friend, my hope for you today is that you have a desire to be your own master. And the way to do that is by denying yourself. Avoid things that will take away your control. I'm going to give you a few more examples here as we round things out. So sometimes being able to speak the truth and be not afraid to do that, but just have courage to speak the truth. I had an experience where I was in a work situation and I had one of our leaders, she grabbed me for a project and she says, I want Philip to come on this team too. And then she says something that kind of caught me off guard. And she said it in front of everybody and I heard her say it. And she said, I know that Philip will speak the truth. And that just kind of blew my mind because I didn't know that she recognized that about me. And it was kind of revealing for myself too, that that's just kind of a personal policy that I have. And in the business world, it can be hard to speak the truth sometimes. And I honestly haven't done it all the time perfectly. And no one does. But you should do it enough so that everyone knows that they can trust you. And your goal should be to do it right every time and to tell the truth every time and to be honest. And that's really important. And when people can trust you, your freedom expands so much. You can pretty much accomplish just about anything you need to. And it's a beautiful thing. You know, another thing where you can deny yourself is a lot of times we want to criticize people, but instead of criticizing people, we should find ways to praise them and lift them up. We mentioned this earlier. You know, I have coworkers, I have people that I've worked with in the business world, and I come to work and I'm able to do 2 or 3 things in the morning before they even show up to work. And when they get to work, they're like, Philip, I can't even function until I have my coffee or my energy drink. Like, just give me a moment here, okay? And, you know, they've lost some freedom because they require chemicals to influence how they feel and how they act in the work that they're able to do. Whereas I don't have that burden, right? So all of those things prevent people's freedom. Something else that's huge that I think captures way too much of our imaginations and way too much of our hearts and way too much of our integrity is the entertainment we consume. And we consume way too much violence. You know, our entertainment today is so violent and so many people love the violence in movies, and it prevents them from being their best person and from exercising wisdom, and it destroys and corrupts their ability to make good decisions. The same goes for pornography. Pornography is in all of our entertainment, most of our entertainment, and it's easy to find everywhere. And so many people get sucked into it, and it just takes the life out of them, and it's so pernicious. And when you deny yourself of pornography or anything related to it, it totally gains strength to be your own person, to make your own decisions, and to understand the difference between right and wrong, and to be virtuous in your choices. And that's just priceless. Like you can't, you just can't make that up any other way. You have to make the right choice, and that power that comes to you is phenomenal. And so you just don't want to engage in any of those things because it'll sap your virtue, it'll sap your power. And when you do engage in these things, you know, ultimately what you're doing is you're deferring responsibility for your own self and for others. And you don't want that, do you? And I don't want that for myself either. I want to take responsibility for myself and for others that I have stewardship for. There's, you know, of course, most people, I can't control what they do, right? And even those who I have stewardship for, I can't control what they do, but I can influence them and I can be a powerful force for good in their lives. And I want to be in control. So I deny myself of those things that would prevent me from being in control, that would allow me to be able to be a good steward over those who are in my stewardship. And of course, first and foremost, that comes back to me. I need to be in control of myself before I can control anything else and seek to help and bless the lives of others, right? My friend, I hope this episode has been beneficial for you. I hope something that I've said today has uplifted you, inspired you, and I hope you've been able to take a personal inventory as we've gone through this episode, and you can think about what it is that you need to go back through and take more control of your life and deny yourself of certain things that may be holding you back. I've enjoyed our time together as always, and we'll catch you on the next episode. God bless.